Hey guys, welcome to the Honest Youth Pastor YouTube channel, the channel that helps believers use biblical discernment in all aspects of life. Welcome to the Tuesday Night Live stream. I said that really fast. Josh, how's it going, buddy?
Hey man, it's great. How are you?
I am tired, but I am here. So, also guys, just so you know, I did get the dates wrong. Last week I said we were going to have Paul from Paul and Morgan on. I was wrong. I've got some dates wrong. So we're shifting like everything back. But we do have people lined up, and then I've already got somebody lined up for March, which will be really interesting conversation on homeschooling versus public schooling. So we'll look at that in March. But anyway, tonight we are going to be talking about believers, Christians, and possessions, right? So money, property, things. Like, how do we deal with those well? Because clearly, in the world we live in, you're going to have stuff, but how do you use that stuff? And we're going to be looking at a few scriptures as we go through here, because I think it's something that people deal with. I mean, obviously not just younger Christians, but as you sort of progress in years, typically, I mean, I don't know with the economy now, but typically you gain more things as you go along in life. That's how usually it works. So what do you do with those things as you gain them? So I got some stories on that. But Josh, I mean, have you found that to be true? Like the older you get, the more you have to navigate, oh, okay, what do I do with this newfound stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. As you progress through life, in theory, you're going to get a job, you're going to progress in a career, you're going to earn more money, and you're going to accumulate more things. And it's a question of what are you accumulating? Is it good? Does it benefit you and your family? And then how do you balance? I think the root of the question is how do you balance giving and receiving, right? Like we're taking in all the time. How do we give out also? Right? Because if you're only ever taking in without giving out, that's not necessarily good. So, sorry, I feel like I'm jumping ahead. So yes, I have experienced this. Oh, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. That's my fault. I had the thing on mute.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. That's what I get. I'm just going to move my little controller away. There's no reason to mute it. The furnace isn't going to come on. So,
Like, oh man, what did I do?
no. So it is a progressive question though, right? So like, I'm going to show my age here, but like 20 years ago, like the way I handled $20 is a lot different than I handle $20 now. 20 years ago, it was like,
True.
oh no, what can I spend this on? How far can I stretch this? And now it's kind of like, $20. It's whatever.
Well, to be fair, 20 years ago, you could take your family out to dinner for $20 at McDonald's.
That's true. Okay, adjust for inflation. So that's a good point
Yeah.
there. But so there's a couple verses I think we can jump into here as we go. Now, one of the things that I think just as believers, one of the verses that gets brought up a lot, and I think something that would be good sort of to kick this conversation off on is in Acts. So one of the things again that gets thrown around a lot is Acts chapter 2 verse 45. And it's talking about the early church. Obviously, this verse usually gets taken out of context for a couple reasons, but we can talk through that. But 45 specifically says, "And they began to sell their property and possessions, and were sharing them among with all, with as anyone might have need." And I think one of the things that we have to think about first off, as believers, is that. And this was a hard concept, I guess, for me to get for a long time, was that when, like, my money isn't necessarily my money, right? So, like,
Right.
I obviously go to work, I do the work, I get paid for it, but then Christians, or we should at least, process this differently. I mean, the idea that I now have money and now I have to be a good steward of it, but it's not really mine. Like, it's a gift from God for me to do with it for his glory. And I think one of the really interesting things we see, especially in Acts 2 verse 45, isn't the concept of communism, but rather the concept of understanding that, hey, this money isn't mine. I should give it to those that need it. And the idea specifically in this context is fellow believers. Like if I, in my local community, know someone's in need and I'm able to help them out, like it's as a brother or a sister in Christ, I should do that. And I should do it. Like there's this real tone here that it's like, I'm investing well, right? So that's that selling of property and possessions. I'm investing things well so I can get a return and then use that money to help other believers in this process. My church has done that a lot. Do you have examples of that? I mean, I do, but I don't want to do all of the talking here. on that.
Oh, examples of generosity and giving things away.
Yeah, within your local community for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I have very personal, intimate examples of that. So 4 years or so ago, I was in a business and it fell apart, and Janelle and I didn't know how we were going to feed the kids, like straight up. So we went to our pastor and said, "Hey, this is what happened." And he said, "Get in here." And we sat down. We looked at our budget, and they said, "Here's what we're going to give you every month for the next 2 months until you can, get a job, get things going." And along the way, Mike, I'm telling you, like, there's no money in the accounts, and a check comes in the mail, and we could pay our electric bill. There's no money in our checking account. We opened the mailbox. There's $300 in cash gift cards. We can go buy food for the kids. Right? There's no money in our accounts. We don't know what's going on. I got a refund from the VA for my VA home loan. From 8 years previous, they charged me a fee they weren't supposed to, and just at that moment, figured it out. We're in these dire straits. Got a check for $2,500 for them. Right? And all along the way, all of these, some of it's obviously providential, but then there's all these acts of generosity from believers who we don't know who they are, giving money to get us through that time period so we can keep our house and feed our kids.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think so. That's the beautiful thing, I think, about a functional biblical church is the ability to say that, like, even though, and again, depending on what size of church you're in, like you said, you may not know half these people that are giving, but they're giving. Right. I know when my daughter was born, she was born premature. We spent 4.5 months, I think, maybe more. My wife would correct me, I'm sure, because I'm sure I got these numbers wrong, but it was a long time. It was a very long time we spent in the hospital because she was born 4 or 5. She was 2 pounds and 14 ounces. She was a little miracle baby that she even made it. And so we had to spend a huge amount of time in the NICU. And that entire time, our local church and some churches around us, because we're in a very rural area, so it's a very tight-knit sort of church community, were giving us gift cards, money, food. We didn't have to worry about it. We'd actually just bought a house 2 years prior to that. All of that went to making sure that we didn't lose the house, that we were fed, that we had gas money, that we were taken care of. My job, there was somebody there that was able to work something out in a way that it was actually, I didn't have to worry about losing my job. And it wasn't like an FMLA, like a short-term thing. Like they were just able to help us out in the way to where it's like, hey, you're going to probably need a little bit more time than they're going to be able to give you. So we're going to help you out here. And it was amazing to see that. And again, you hear this a lot. Like people are like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to lose my house. And then the body of believers come around you and help you. And it's not just, it's not just in situations like this. I know there's my friend Rob, every time someone in his church either loses a job or they have a family member lost, they're like, all right, we got you covered on meals for at least, 2-3 weeks, whatever you need, you got it. And the church just jumps in. And then we're not talking about huge church here. We're talking about like, 185, 225 around, fluctuating there, of people that are just like, we're going to give as much as we need to give. And, they're able to do that again, because like we see here, selling what we need to sell, investing where we need to invest. So we're able to give with that mindset of like, this isn't mine anyway. Like this isn't mine. This is mine to invest well and be generous with. And, yeah, that's amazing. And we see that too. And I just keep going back to this over and over again because it geeks me out about the early church in regards to there wasn't anyone hungry among them. Like not only just among them, but like in their communities, they even reached out further after they took care of their brothers and sisters, and reached out even further to say, hey, we're going to help you out. And I just think that's like, when we start this conversation about possessions and money, like I think that's a great place. Like you have to have the right lenses to see that with. That it's not like a force thing. It's I want to be able to help you how I can help you. And that means being generous, investing well, like being really, purposeful with your dollars and not just wasting them. So, let me see here. Do you have any, I got a few more verses pulled up, but I didn't know if you had anything over there you wanted to say.
So as far as Acts 2:45 is concerned, I think the cool phrase these days is push back. I'm going to push back a little on that. And this kind of gets a root of the question that kind of brought this up, right? Was this idea of how do we balance our ownership of things against everything belongs to God.
Yep.
Right. It's one of those things where they both seem to be true at the same time, but they also seem to be diametrically opposed, because how can we both own things simultaneously? And Acts 2:45 says they sold their possessions. Right. It doesn't say they sold God's possession. They sold their possessions. And the Old Testament, the Pentateuch, right, the Torah, it advocates for personal private property. Right. People owned animals. I mean, they owned slaves back then, right? There's all these laws over property, and then there's laws with consequences for when your property acts out of turn, right? If your ox that you own kills somebody, you make restitution because you're responsible, you own it. And so there's this balancing act that we have to do between, yes, this is ours, but everything is the Lord's, and how do we reconcile that, right? So that's kind of my pushback, is that it was their property. Now I agree with you. They have the mentality that it's not theirs, it's the Lord's, and so they bless other people with it. But they were able to do that because they had private property in the first place. And so I think that's one of those tensions that we kind of have to balance as we talk about this. Is we have our own personal private property that we've worked for, right? We have, and then it's a matter of, how do we use that then to bless others and bless the Lord as a result?
Yeah. Well, and a few things. I mean, just talking about the Old Testament, right? So obviously this is just one verse, but where is this? Ecclesiastes 5:19. As for every man who God has given riches and wealth, he also has empowered him to eat from them and receive his reward and rejoice in his labors. This is a gift of God. Going back to that whole idea, like, you've worked for it, you're to enjoy it. This is a gift from God. This is this idea of, like, there is a certain, and I think that's where the balance is, right? This idea of like, hey, this isn't mine, but there is a certain part of this that comes down to, like, you work hard for it, you earn it, you now have it, now do something well with it. But this is still a gift to you for your labor, for your diligence. I don't have the verse pulled up, but I remember it being quoted to me a lot as a child, which is the one that does not work, does not eat. That, I forget where that's. Huh?
I swear I want to say it's in Timothy.
I don't remember. I just remember my parents quoting to me that all the time, basically saying, "Hey, bro, you're not if you don't do your chores, you're not getting allowance." But the whole idea of, like, if you're not putting that effort in, you're not going to get anything back. Which, that goes to another point. I made it wasn't my tweet. I forget whose it was that I posted about this idea of Christian work ethic. This idea that as believers, there is this idea that you're supposed to actually be doing something. Man, I should have prepped for this better. I forget where Paul, I think it's Philippians perhaps, or maybe when he writes to the Thessalonians, where he's saying like you should work with your own hands. You should, you shouldn't be lazy or mooching off of other people. The idea is that as believers, I mean, this all goes in line. As believers, we're supposed to work hard. We're supposed to, have this diligence about us to then earn the things that we have, understanding that what we have is a gift from God. And then as we get that, do well with it. And, give where it needs to be give, invest where you need to invest. And be really, really, the word is escaping me, not diligent, but, be really wise with it. So that, it's a John Wesley quote that I've also heard my entire life, but earn all you can, save all you can, give all you can, basically. I think it's something along those lines.
That's good. Really good.
The idea that, you're not going to be able to give and help and do things with your money if you don't work hard, earn a lot, but not earn a lot for you to store up, but rather to earn a lot to give away. On that point. Okay, I want to move on to, unless you have something else, I think we can move on to more of possessions outside of money. Do you have anything to add to the money part of it, or the kind of the work ethic before we move on?
No, I did look up that reference. It was 2 Thessalonians 3:10 for your, I just brought it up real quick. Even when we were with you, we would give you this command: if anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat.
Yeah, there you go.
So.
Yeah, I got preached that one a lot as a child. So I remember it. I don't remember where it came from, but I remember being told that a lot.
This could be a whole separate podcast. The whole idea of work goes all the way back to the garden, right? That's baked into the entire created order, right? Like Adam was to tend the garden and keep it. He had to work in the garden. That's a part of our entire existence. To not work goes against the entire order of creation.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not for tonight.
So let's move on from the money part. So obviously you work, you get money. As believers, we obviously see that differently. But I think on this same line of thought of like, how do we as believers really parse out this, our possessions, God's possession? How do we do that well? I think a lot of this conversation also has to do with like hospitality. This idea of saying like, obviously you can give things out, right? I mean, there's ways to help people. We've both talked about instances where we were helped by our local church communities, but there's obviously above and beyond that. There's more than just like giving. I think what we see again, just baked into Christianity, as far as like the work and the practice of it, is this hospitality, this nature of saying like, what I have, like my house, my car, the things that I have are now also extensions of how God can provide for other people as well. So it's not just me saying, all right, you can have a couple dollars, here's a Band-Aid for a situation, but also me saying like, hey, come over. Hey, you need a ride. Like, I got this. And I just don't know, like, I don't know if we process it that way before. Or we process it that way very often, right? I mean, I don't know. Have you ever heard a sermon on that? I don't know if I have, really, on
hospitality.
Well, specifically, like, yeah, the providing your house, providing your car, providing the things you have.
Can't think of one off the top of my head. No.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things. I can't think of one, but I do know there's a lot of people that I know personally that live that out well, right? This idea that my stuff. So I'll just brag on my father-in-law a little bit. So there's a lot of, he's worked really hard his entire life. He's retired recently, and he has a lot of nice stuff. But again, a lot of the nice stuff is from working really hard and investing in things and being wise with his money. My mother-in-law would say he could be wiser, but being wise with his money. But the idea being that like the dude, since me and my wife were dating years and years ago, is incredibly generous with his things, right? So it wouldn't be anything for me to be visiting them while I was dating my wife, and like a dozen people would come in the house, usually like my brother-in-law's friends or something like that. Sure. And he would just be like, hey guys, you want to jump in the pool? Go jump in the pool. You guys want some food? Grab some food. And it wasn't just a, hey, I'm glad you're here, but it was very much like an extension of his Christian witness to everyone. Like, this is my stuff, but I've invested in this stuff so you can be blessed by it. Like, it's not, I bought a pool and that's just my pool. Or I bought this nice television, it's just my nice television. Or I've bought this, that, or the other thing. It's like, I've invested in this and I've got nice stuff, but it's not just to have the nice stuff. It's so that you can be blessed by it as well. Because I've been blessed, so now I'm blessing you. And I don't think we talk about that a lot, but I've seen a lot of people, not just my father-in-law, kind of live that out and be examples of that. And I think that's one of the reasons, for example, even hospitality is one of the qualifications for an elder. This idea of, your home is open, you're come on, that whole process.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's good to keep in mind. So, we're getting back to this kind of this both and idea, this nuanced concept. We've gone out, we've earned these things, we've worked for them. But at the end of the day, everything that we have is a gift from God. Right. The reason that we're able to go and work and do these things is because we're able to stand up, be ambulatory, exchange carbon dioxide for oxygen. Right. I have a few brain cells that are able to operate at a capacity that someone was willing to employ me. Right. And that's a gift of the Lord. So all the things that we take for granted, right? Our heart beating, our blood pressure being sufficient for us to live. All of these various things, which Colossians says that all of that is held together by the power of Christ, right? Like, he holds those things together by the power of his word, right? So my beating heart, my brain, all those things allow us to go out and do those things and be fruitful. And we operate in a created order where those principles of sowing and reaping exist. Literally as farmers, but even just in general, right? If you invest in something over time, more often than not, is going to grow in value, right? Land, now, in the last couple hundred years, right, we have the stock market and things like that. But over time, it grows. And that goes back to that created order. That's how the Lord's made things. And so even as we work and invest and accumulate goods, they're all gifts from God.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that then forms the kind of the root and the foundation of, because it's a gift from God, one, we can enjoy it because God is good. And it makes me that where Christ is talking about giving gifts to children, right? And right, even God wants to give gifts to his children. He wouldn't give his children stone if they asked for bread,
Mm-hmm.
right? He likes giving gifts. That he gives them so that we can enjoy them. And you can take that all the way back to Edenic experience, right? It wasn't some stoic existence, right? It was lavish and it was wonderful and better than we can probably imagine. But then the intention has always also been that we would bless others. And that's what we're getting at here in the New Testament, like in Acts, and as we're talking, probably through some of the other verses that you have, we are receiving gifts from the Lord, but then we're also giving gifts to others in like kind. And that is what being a Christian and being made in the image of Christ is like, where we receive gifts and we give gifts. And then we learn that when you do that, the Lord typically blesses you with more than you can give. Now that becomes problematic when we think that we can manipulate the Lord to get more.
Yeah,
right?
Is a little prosperity gospel. Yeah, there. Right. If you can slip in.
Yeah, that's not the case. The whole prosperity gospel is garbage. You can't manipulate the Lord. But I do think that is a principle that when a person is truly generous and giving and does that, the Lord will use them as a conduit to bless other people, and that means they're gonna get more.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean anything to them because their heart's already in that place where they're going to give it, right? So
yeah. Well, two things you said there that I think I want to hit on for a little bit because we definitely have some time tonight. But the first one is this idea of enjoying the things that God has given you while also blessing others. I mean, I think there's this mentality sometimes that we're like, oh, we can't enjoy the nice things because then there's some enjoyment coming in somehow, some way twisted to be sinful. But the idea being like, there are good gifts to be enjoyed. I mean, there is something to be said about, having a pool, for example, right? If you have invested and you can afford that and you've worked hard for it, then enjoying that to make memories with your family and others. There's something to be said about having, I know guys that have really nice cars, and the idea is it's like they enjoy not only having that, but there are people that I know, and I'm not there headspace wise, but have like really nice Corvettes that will literally let anyone drive them. And I'm just like, I don't think I could do that, which is why I probably don't have one. But this idea is that like anybody, just like, hey, this is a super nice car. Hey, go for it. Hold on a second. This is really a super nice car. Go ahead and, drive it. I want you to enjoy it just like I enjoy it. And this idea of enjoying the good things that God has given you, and knowing that that's not like a bad thing. Like it's okay to enjoy the things that God has given you. But also the other thing that you said there at the end was the more you give, the more you'll probably get back. And again, like you said, I think you need to, unfortunately, because of the prosperity gospel, you have to put some big asterisk out in front of that. But the truth is, if you invest well, if you are honest about it, if you run your business or you do your job well, there are things that come with that because of that honesty and because you've done a good job and because you've given 110%. And just because you're doing what you know you should do, there are things that come back from that. There are things that I know that I've some bonuses and perks and things that I've gotten from work just for doing what I was supposed to do in the first place. And that's a small example of the bigger principle you're talking about. But if you're honest at work, you probably are going to get a raise. If you're good at your job and you're doing what you're supposed to do, you probably are going to get, a promotion. And that's just part of that principle of being like, hey, if you're being generous, if you're being honest, if you're being forthright, like there's going to be this prevenient grace in your life that is going to come naturally, even from unbelievers that are blessing you, not even knowing that they're blessing you, that God is using them to bless you. And I think that those two things we need to really I don't know if we talk about those enough. This idea that you can enjoy the things that God has given you, and there are rewards that you're going to get for doing the right thing. And those are good gifts that you can receive and not feel bad about. Because I think there's been people that I've talked to that like get a whole bunch of money for whatever reason, always legitimate, but they feel bad about having all this money because, I shouldn't have this, or somebody else should have got it. And it's just like, hey, do with it what you need to do with it, but you deserve this. You earned it. There was this, just the natural progress of you doing the right thing has got you to this place. So don't feel bad about it. A Christian virtue isn't like poverty. Oh, we just all need to be poor. Like, we don't see that.
Right.
Yeah. But
that's good. I think so. Christians, we tend toward extremes, and
yeah, you don't say.
At least we do, right?
Yeah.
And we're not very good at nuance. And I think especially today, we're not good at holding things in tension. That's something that has come up with me a lot and trying to figure out. That's something that Elijah and I talk about, quite a bit about, is this idea of, kind of holding things in tension. You just made me think of something. There's this a hymn. I can't remember the title of it, and I don't like it. And there's a line, I refuse to sing it. And the line is, fade, fade, all earthly joy. Right. And it's kind of extreme. And the point, right, is that our joy and everything is in Christ. I'm like, okay, that's great. Marriage is an earthly joy. Children are an earthly joy. Church is an earthly joy, right? And on down the list, here's all these God-given joys that we're called not only to enjoy, but to protect and care for and grow and nurture. Why would we want them to fade? Rather, when we enjoy them properly, they glorify the Lord and they bring glory to Christ. So rather than having them fade like we're dreary, like we shouldn't wear color, I mean, maybe we should just stop using zippers and electricity. We should just only wear buttons and wear black and, get those little sin sifter head things.
I say that the Amish would be insulted, but they'll never see this. So
Right. So, that's kind of that mentality though, where it's like we have to have this mindset that we're super, super poor, but we have Jesus, and it almost turns things around to where it almost makes God some sort of like, I don't know, it's not like a sugar daddy almost. Like, he's got the money, he's going to take care of us, we don't have to do anything. And that's not right either. And I think that like I just said, that detracts from those earthly joys that are God-given. I think there really is something to enjoying what God has given us. There is what's the verse? I brought it up here. So Psalm 19:10, it is talking about the law of God. 19:10 says, much to be desired are they, that's the precepts and law of the Lord, much to be desired are they than gold, even much fine gold, sweeter also than honey and the drippings of the honeycomb. There's only one way to understand what that verse means and the magnitude of it, and that's if you've eaten honey. So the point of that is you only get how sweet those things are. Have you ever eaten honeycomb?
I've never had just a straight up honey. No, I have not. No, but I've heard it's great.
I had it once, and honeycomb, it's like 3 times sweeter than honey. Like, it's wild. It's out of this world. Like, it's really crazy. It's really, really, really good. And once you've kind of had that, then you go back and you read Psalm 19:10. Now all of a sudden you have this understanding of a real world experience of having tasted honeycomb, and now you get it a little bit more than just reading like, oh, it's better than gold. Right? Like, how do you help someone understand that? Well, you have them eat honeycomb, and then they get it. And the point behind that is that we are able to experience things in this life, and they amplify our understanding of the Lord. And the same is true of possessions. As we work and as we accumulate wealth and we get things, those things can either help us magnify the Lord because we see and experience him through them, right? Like right now we have internet, I have a computer monitor, a webcam, a microphone, keyboard, right? Those are things that I hope are magnifying our relationship with the Lord and hopefully others. But the second that those items become an end to themselves, where I need a better monitor and a better webcam, and that's my life. Everything is dedicated to accumulating those things. Now they've become idols and they have replaced the Lord. And so again, it comes back to these things we have to hold in tension, where we accumulate these things and we have them. Are we enjoying the Lord through them, or are they no longer the means to enjoying the Lord, but they've become the end in themselves and are the sum total of our enjoyment?
Yeah, no, I think that's good. That reminded me of a, so I'm going to butcher this whole thing. I can't remember it, but I remember Matt Chandler quoting somebody. I don't know who it was. And then this quote I'm still going to get wrong, but here's the gist of it, is that like, if these experiences I experienced that are so amazing are just a taste of heaven, how good is heaven? Like the fact that the Lord enables us to enjoy just this taste of his goodness in this life, and just the taste of it is as amazing as it is, that I can love the way that I can love, that I would have never imagined. I mean, like you said, until you taste the honey, you don't know, right? Like, I thought I loved my wife until I've been married to her for decades, right? I thought I knew what love was until I saw my kid for the first time, and then that's undescribable. And so then you have this idea of like, oh, I thought I knew this thing until something else came along. Oh, wow, this is like, what is this? Like, this is even better than the other thing. And I think, like, going back to what you said, it's this idea of like all of these experiences, all of these gifts that we have via possessions, specifically because that's what we're talking about, are just like a taste of all this, are facilitating an enjoyment that is meant to amplify and remind us of how good God is. But if that becomes the, oh, I have this cool car because I want this cool car, instead of I want this so I can enjoy it and share it with others, those are two different ends. So I want let's sort of shift the convo a little bit. So going to a verse that happens a lot whenever you talk about Christians and money, this often comes up with people, especially online, usually people that don't believe in God, but we'll quote the Bible. Reference Matthew chapter 19, verse 21, where Jesus says, if you wish to be complete, go and sell all your possessions and give them to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. And usually that's twisted. Obviously, that's the rich man approaching Jesus, but usually that's like, well, if Christians really followed the things that Jesus said, you'd sell everything. You would have all of this stuff. You would be a very poverty-ridden people, and and again, I should have mentioned this before because this piggybacks on exactly what you just said. But this idea of, hey, if you really want to follow Jesus, you won't have this stuff. Which isn't the actual context of the verse, but that's usually what gets brought up when we talk about, well, if Christians want to talk about possessions, you guys should have it. Jesus said, sell everything, right? That's what he said.
Right. Yeah. I think it's good, like you said, right? You always preach context. Context is important. And Christ is speaking to a specific individual who has purported to have kept the law perfectly. What does he now need to do to enter the kingdom of heaven? Well, there's one thing, apparently, that remains in his heart, and that's his love of his own possessions, right? And so that's right. We're holding these ideas in tension. He had those things, whatever they may be. He was rich. That those riches in and of themselves are not wrong, but it becomes clear in the text that it is for him because he's unwilling to let them go. Yeah. And so that's preventing him from getting into heaven, because he will not allow himself to submit to the Lord because he wants to be rich. He would prefer to be rich than have a relationship with Christ. And that's what Christ is getting at here in Matthew, right? And that's why he even says there's a warning, right? The very next little section there, he says that it's hard for a rich person to get into heaven, right? And that's an apt warning as we go out, especially as Americans, even in 2023 with whatever percent inflation we have, we are the richest people in the history of the world in terms of just sheer comfort, the fact that I can set my home to be 72 degrees if I want, right? And pop on air conditioning at the same time so there's no humidity, like never before experienced by mankind, especially for us. It's easy. It would be very easy for us to prefer those things than the cross of Christ, and to be unwilling to give things like that up if that's what the Lord required of us to serve him and love him. Now, I do think that we can enjoy the Lord in those things if we're cognizant of the fact that God allowed me to be born in North America in this time frame and to enjoy indoor plumbing and air conditioning. I mean, that's a blessing, because there are a lot
Thank
of
God
people
for
out there,
indoor plumbing. Yeah.
right? You know what I thought would be a great real series, and maybe I'm giving it all away now, but it
Uh-oh.
would be explaining all of these things to the apostles. Like, you know, oh yeah, oh man, I almost didn't make it to the bathroom. What's a bathroom? Oh yeah, well, a toilet. What
Yeah.
was a toilet? Well, yeah. Right, and you go on down the line, because we're so far removed
Mm-hmm.
from those dudes wearing sandals in a desert. Like, there's just
Yeah.
no concept, absolutely no concept of even you and I being able to do this now.
Oh no, yeah, that'd
How
be
do you
crazy.
explain
Yeah.
that to the Apostle Paul? I talked to my buddy Mike. He's
This would be
700 miles away.
this would be sorcery, is what this is.
Yeah, right,
Sorcery.
right.
Well, and I think that for the last little bit of this, I mean, obviously we'll probably pivot to something else because we have some time, but I think this part here would be worth sitting on, because what you brought up there, I think, was really good in regards to this idea of the rich man is super comfortable and he doesn't want to give that comfort up. So he's cool with like being very diligent in obeying the commands that he can obey. I mean, he's fine with that. But the idea is that this comfort of giving that up for the sake of following this, I mean, in his day, he's just following a good teacher, a rabbi like this. He's going to have to give that to somebody so he can go do that because he can't haul it all around. And this idea of saying, what's more important here? My comfort in this situation or pursuing Christ for us. And this,
Right.
I think this comes down, well, especially when we talk about jobs, for example, job opportunities, pay, promotions, things like that. So there's a lot of things. I mean, I've worked in the corporate world my entire adult life. And I can tell you, there are ways to get promoted a whole lot faster if you're willing to cut some corners, suck up a little bit, and step on some people. You can get there a whole lot quicker. And I think in that situation, like, obviously this is not a one-to-one comparison, but there are some bylines here between it that if I want comfort, there's ways that I can get that and be very comfortable. But they also exclude me from following Christ the way that I need to. There are ways you can get, you can advance in wealth by cutting some corners there too, but doing that and getting comfortable is also going to exclude you from being able to follow Christ well. And so what is that? I mean, would you prefer your comfort over Christ or not? Because I think that's the main thing here. Obviously, we've talked about money and generosity and everything up to this point, but his main thing is like, I just don't want to give that up, because if I do, then I don't have that comfort. I don't have the security anymore. And I think in a real, not something I don't know, well, some people definitely had to face it the last couple of years, but the majority of us didn't. But this idea of, am I going to follow my convictions and say, okay, I'm going to lose this job, or am I not going to follow my convictions and go ahead and keep this job? And again, not to make a one-to-one comparison, because it's not, but it's in the same thought process of saying, like, what am I willing to hang on to for comfort here versus what am I willing to give up to follow my convictions? And I think obviously brothers and sisters in all different parts of the world have to make that decision a lot more often than we do. Some of them on a daily basis, to say, okay, well, I'm giving up comfort to follow Christ then. And so going back to the original question, right? Holding intention, his things, my things. Sometimes, or maybe for somebody watching this, or even for me and you, I mean, who knows what the next 10 years hold? There may be a time that comes where, we have to say, okay, what am I, where does that line draw for me? What do I want the comfort more than I want Christ? And what does that look like? Because when the rubber hits the road, and I haven't ever had to do this, but I can imagine how difficult it would be to say, okay, family, we don't have this house anymore because we're going to be faithful to Jesus, or we're not going to eat this week because daddy's looking for a new job because we're being faithful to Jesus. And that's a lot easier said than done, clearly, but that's what's kind of happening here. It's like, what do you want to be comfortable, or do you want to follow Christ?
Right. Yeah. It's so as we progress through life, and as you grow in age, you get more responsibility, right? That's universal, I think. Married, unmarried, I don't think matters, right? As you get older, you will get more responsibility. Just in terms of as a citizen, you're 18 now, you're obligated to the law. You have the ability to vote, right? And with all of those things come responsibility. But as that responsibility, I lost where I was going with that. It just vaporized, man. Dang it. Oh, I had it too. Sad.
I'm not sure where you were going with it.
Yeah, I know. I'm not either.
Well, I don't know. Maybe, I mean, so the more responsibility you have, the more people you're responsible for, the harder that decision sort of becomes, right?
Oh, yeah, no, I got it. So
Okay.
as that responsibility increases, right? What you were talking about with, telling your family, oh, we don't have the house anymore because we're faithful to Jesus. As we grow and that responsibility increases, it's like being in a gym, right? When you first show up to the gym, or like when you're me and you go back to the gym, you get to use the little 5-pound weights, right? So here's big old Josh, big in all the wrong ways, using little 5-pound weights. But it's like being at the gym. You get to put the reps in, right? You have this little bit of responsibility, and if you're responsible with it in the right way, you're going to get more. And if you're responsible with it in the right way, right, and that grows and grows and grows over time, hopefully what you've said never happens. But if it should, hopefully you've put the reps in, right? And this is the being faithful in the little things over time. You've put the reps in and you've been faithful in the little things over time, so that when the big one hits, right, when you have to affirm something you don't want to affirm, or you're losing everything, you're ready for that, because the Lord along the way has been preparing you for that. He has been putting you through it, right? Little you've been putting the reps in. And in terms of this conversation, he has been blessing you with things along the way. And you've been doing the right things with it. You have been enjoying him in them. You have been giving to others. You've been giving and receiving and giving and receiving. You've been receiving little things and giving. And then over time, you've received bigger things. You've got that promotion, that bonus, whatever, and you've given proportionally to that. And as that has gone on and on and on, you're ready for that moment. You may not know it at the time, and it's going to hurt, and it's not going to detract, from the suck factor, but you're ready for it. And you will be able to make that right decision because you've been faithful in these little things. Does that make sense?
No, for sure. And I think that's where, so especially when, again, hopefully people are mentoring other people along the way, but that's where, for example, there's, I remember when I sat down and asked my father-in-law if I, for his daughter to end in marriage. And I remember some of the words I don't remember because I was scared half to death, but some of the words I do remember were that, hey, you're going to there's going to be a honeymoon phase and there's going to be some hard times. So be prepared for those. And he wasn't just talking about like emotionally, like you're not like, the fighting part of it. He's just like, you're going to be broke. Like that's going to be the thing.
Yeah.
And the idea, I mean, above all of that was the fact that he was trying to give me advice that my little pea brain at the time was not prepared for. Like I was just like, whatever. Yeah, I know what broke is. No, I did not know what broke was yet. And so the idea, I think, I mean, going with what you're saying, as you progress, you're going to go through these situations. Hopefully you're obviously growing through them, but passing that down too. Like that's one of the things that I think we really need, just saying, hey, being there for other people through those situations. I can't tell you how many older, wiser guys that as I've come upon situations that, again, were totally looking back on them there to build my faith for bigger things later.
Right.
We're there to sort of coach me along the way of being like, hey, this seems like a big deal. It is a big deal, but the way you handle it matters, and the way that you approach it matters. And having people, like, again, going back to the very first thing we started with in this conversation, a local body of believers around you to help you out. All of that ties together, I think, as an advantage for the believer. What I mean by that is this, like, to have somebody there that in your time of need steps up when you don't expect them to do that. You're just like, I'll figure it out. I mean, there's this pride that comes with it, right? That goes, I'll figure it out. But people that are there to have your back. And then that really acts as an example for you to be like, wow, okay, next time when I'm able to do this, I'm going to be able to do that. I want to help other people. I've seen the benefit of this. And then in all of that, having older, wiser believers there with you, walking you through that, not just financially, but just through wisdom of how to handle the situation well. And really demonstrating and explaining at the same time, not just saying, hey, you know, this is how you should handle your finances, and this is how, you know, you should be generous, or this is how you should invest, but demonstrating that for you. And I mean, this is why I talk about how important the local body is for the believer.
Big time. Yeah.
That
Huge.
you see that happening, you get the benefits of that in your life, and then you're able to then internalize that and like do that for others later. And that's like full circle. So when we're talking about like, oh, God's things and my things, and, you know, if they're all his, how do I handle them? I think it's worked out really just within the local body, a healthy local body, of course,
Yep.
of seeing people that have been through it, that have learned from it, that are passing that knowledge down. Not so that you as a younger believer can avoid it, but just so you can do it better. So that it's not like again, no one offered to pay all the hospital bills for us, but they were there to help out in the little things they could, so that we could be on a better footing to then pay off the hospital bills. And so it's not like, oh, just everybody pitches in and, you know, we'll take care of you, because there is something to the reality of doing it yourself, working hard. We've already done those verses, working hard, earning it well, and then, you know, having that gratification of paying those things off, and then being generous with other, you know, with the things you have. And I think really the question that we've been talking about, God's things, our things, how does that all work out? It's worked out full circle within the local body, with, again, multi-generational churches, people that have been through life, people that are just beginning life, and all of that, really that gift to the believer to be able to live in that. And, you know, it's going to be messy, but work through all of that and to learn from it. So you can see, like, because when you're younger, and maybe you can attest to this, when I was younger, like, nah, this is mine. Like, I only had 2 nickels and I bought this with my 2 nickels. It's my thing. And having another believer being like, it's really not your thing. Like, you think it's your thing, and good for you for working hard for it, but that's not your thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You know, one of the nice things about the Bible is, you know, all of the word pictures that have been provided to us as it's been written. We hear, you know, talk about living water quite a bit, right? As opposed to standing water or stagnant water, right? So this idea of being stagnant, everyone understands, is not a good thing, right? But living water is moving water, right? Like it's moving, right? That's where you're going to find the fish and whatnot. But when the water stops moving, it can become stagnant, and it could turn into a swamp, right? Or it could be a pond. I don't know. I'm not a geologist, so don't roast me if I'm getting something wrong here. Geology is probably not even the right science for this. So the point is,
I went to public school. I don't know. I don't have a clue.
Oh man. So the point is, when we look at possessions as blessings from the Lord, where He's giving something to us, if we're only ever receiving, it's not this idea of living water now. I'm taking something in and I'm giving something out, and I'm taking something in and I'm giving something out. And I have found in my own life, even like studying and reading and things like that, my mind can only handle so much before I have to start writing something out or journaling or teaching somebody else. Then all of a sudden there's like room in my brain is what it feels like, and I can take more in. I can go learn something else. And so as we're blessed with things, we're given things, when we go out and we bless others, now you've got that motion going, and it's not like this stagnation where it's built up inside of us to where we start to become like Gollum, right? Where he just held on to, like, we joke about this idea of the precious, right? Because it's so extreme in the movies.
Yeah.
But that's what that picture is, right? Like that ring was the end to itself for him, instead of his ability to operate in the world and enjoy the world for what it was. And that's the danger that's in all of us, is that as we receive those kinds of possessions, we obsess over them, and we're more comfortable in the depths of a mountain in the darkness because we have that thing, whatever it is, instead of giving out to others and being generous and being hospitable and all these other things that Christians are called to throughout the New Testament, to be hospitable and to be generous, to be known for generosity. I'm getting ready to teach on 2 Corinthians 9, and that's where Paul is talking about the collection for the saints back in Jerusalem, because the idea is that they had given so much there was nothing left to give. So now all the other churches were coming together for a collection to give to them so that they could eat. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, I mean, that's the level of generosity that is unknown to us today, probably, so, yeah.
No, I like that. I think we can end on that point, that this idea that like I said, like you pointed out there, but also just throughout the early church as well, like after the apostles and whatnot, of this continued theme of generosity of stuff, because this isn't my stuff anyway. And again, I want to be really careful to point out, this isn't I give until I'm just poor and now now I'm out. It's this idea of being wise in what you do and how you do it so that you're able to continually give. And this being known for giving. Like I said, there's letters from governors and prefects to one another or to the emperor about these Christians. Like they keep giving. There's nobody that is in need among them, and they just give. If somebody needs it, they help them out. And this idea that, like, the sad reality, again, there will be somebody that I'm sure that can point out a stat, and I know they're there, that Christians are the most generous people and we give the most to charities and yada, yada, yada. I get it. But the reality is, we could probably top ourselves if we were honest in regards to, like, what are the things that we probably don't need to be. I mean, sure. I'll point the 5 fingers at my face. Like, how much do I eat out that you're looking at $10 a day minimum? Yep. That if you get to the end of the 2 weeks, where could that $100 went other than my stomach that's not making me healthier anyway? And so just looking at our lives and saying, what better ways can I, that's the word, steward. What better ways can I steward this well, that it's not just gratifying me and really not helping me, but rather, like, how can I sit down? And this is where I think the budget really comes into play. Like, I know people hate Dave Ramsey, whatever.
You're going to tag Dave Ramsey?
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't agree with all the man's techniques, but he's the only reason I'm not neck deep in debt right now. So, yeah, I mean, I'd be in a whole lot worse place without that bald man yelling at people. So he's so good at it, though. So yeah. Great. It's like, what are your bills? Well, I got Netflix and 5 cars and a boat. Why you got 5 boats for? Yeah, I mean, it's just this idea of, like, why you have all this stuff. And so,
you nutburger.
So if we were just better at saying, okay, where is my money going? I'll put it this way, and I know we're getting close to the time we got to cut off here. My boss tells me all the time. So I'm a salesman at my job, and what they tell us all the time is, like, you're supposed to run your thing as if it was your money and not our money. And there's a lot of guys that run it because it's not your money, it is their money. So you kind of a little bit more lenient with it. You're gonna, maybe you're gonna, let some stuff, you're going to spend more money than you need to sometimes because it's not yours. But the idea is, if you're treating it like it is yours, like you're going to be held account for this, then you're going to be a little bit more careful with it. And I think that's the same thing with our budgets. If we understand, like, this is a gift from God for us to steward well, and not just to blow because, we're getting blessed, but rather to say, how can I do this well so that he can get the most glory from it? And I think that's where the whole his stuff, our stuff really collides. It demonstrates itself in the local body of believers as well. And then that's an overflow of, like, how we live our lives. So is there places, and I think this, again, not a guilt trip on anybody clearly, but, like, I don't want to add any burdens to you, but this idea of saying, like, could I budget better with the knowledge that this is the Lord's anyway, that I've been given to steward well. And instead of treating him like a multi-million-dollar corporation that I'm just going to keep getting money from and I'll just kind of do what I want with it, saying, like, I should probably handle this better.
Sure.
Because I'm actively an in-between man here, and I need to handle his money better than I need to handle his money as if it was my money and do well with it, basically.
Right. Yeah, I feel like Dave Ramsey has a pretty good handle on it, right? Because his one of his catchphrases is "live like no one else, so you can live like no one else."
Mm-hmm.
And so he doesn't want you living some sort of aesthetic lifestyle, right? So if you do follow those steps, you, like you said, right, both of us can credit him for not being in debt as much as we would be otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
which means that it affords us a lifestyle where we could do that, right, and enjoy it and have that moment where we can enjoy the Lord and be thankful for barbecue, right? Thankful that we can taste it and enjoy it and that it's hot, right? And this is where you can start to get real John Pipery with it and list out every detail and how it lends itself to, to loving the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
which is good because I need to segue to, I owe my ideas to Joe Rigney, right? Not a lot of these are of my own. And that whole honey thing, that comes from Joe Rigney, who I think co-pastored with John or something. But he wrote a book called, so I have it right here. I was reading it today, right? Things of Earth.
Mm-hmm.
This is that's a top 10 book for me, easy, maybe top 5. Like, just help me understand how to enjoy things, to enjoy the Lord, and not have them become means to themselves.
Gotcha.
And that is a mentality that once you get, it really helps guard against idolatry. Not to say that I don't make idols of things, but it helps guard against that. And it really does kind of help you, like, man, this coffee is good. The Lord has allowed me to have it, to taste it, to smell it. And it becomes this whole all-encompassing worldview and life experience where everything does point back to the Lord and you can give thanks for it. And now you are this joyful Christian, right? That the world doesn't understand. They're trying to drink their coffee to wake up, which I am too. I'll be honest. I need my coffee to wake up, but I love it. It just smells so good and it tastes great. And man, so
good deal. So we'll link that book in the description below, guys. If you're interested, I'll go ahead and link that after this is over. So that should be down there if you're watching the replay of that. So guys, hopefully this was helpful to you. 2 dudes rambling on a Tuesday night in regards to finances and possessions and how we deal with them well. And I think, honestly, if you're a younger believer, just being diligent and having wiser people to kind of help you through that is very helpful. It helped me a ton. The way I look at money now in my nearly 40s is totally different than how I looked at it in my 20s. And I think just maturity helps you a lot with that. I'm just growing in sanctification as well. And hopefully tonight, this helped you a little bit in direction as well. As always, guys, if you haven't hit the like button, I don't know what's wrong with you. You need to do that. I don't know how else you expect me to get the serotonin in my brain to make me feel better about myself unless you hit that thing. Also, you're going to need to hit that subscribe button as well so you can be alerted every Tuesday night when we go live. And we'll talk to you next week. Bye.
See ya.